Hey y'all, just about half an hour ago, I finished reading Outrun the Moon by Stacey Lee, and oh my gosh, this book is so good. As I read it though, I realized it's not plot driven really at all. Warned. Very much character driven. Yes, obviously things are happening. It's not a plotless book, but nothing huge happened until almost page 200. So that's your little warning, because as I was reading this, I realized that some people are like, can't do this, it's too slow at the beginning, right? So Outrun the Moon is about a Chinese girl named Mercy. She is a native... That was going to sound totally goofy. She is an American citizen. She was born in California in San Francisco in Chinatown, right? So this takes place in 1906, and the Chinese at the time were really persecuted. Lots of racism and things like that. There was a law that Chinese women couldn't immigrate over, and so her family had obviously been there from before that law was put in place. But so her father does laundry for a living, and it's not easy. It's not like they had modern washing machines and dryers. Her mother is a fortune teller, which Mercy herself doesn't put a lot of stock in, but she does a little bit. And then there's her, and then she has a little brother named Jack. He's 6. And in Chinatown, all of their friends work incredibly hard, and they live in these horrible homes, and they have no privileges, and every time they leave Chinatown, people are mocking them and making fun of them and being really, really rude, right? At the very beginning of the book, we see a scene where Mercy and her brother Jack are going to a very specific store that makes sense on the story. I'm trying to be vague so I don't give a million things away. And as they're walking, they have to pass through the Italian area of the city, and even though the Italians aren't amazingly well off, they are just totally trash talking Mercy and her brother Jack, these cute little Chinese kids, telling them to go back to where they came from and that they are worthless and heathens and all these things. And Mercy stands up for herself, bless her heart, I love her. But it was so raw and real, I guess. Mercy talks a lot about physical traits of people. She has really high cheekbones, which in Chinese culture, I guess, at least according to this book, I didn't look into if it was legitimate or not, it means that you are very bossy and headstrong. So she calls them her bossy cheeks, and in Chinatown, it is not a desired trait. Because as Mercy is told, men don't want wives who are bossy. I don't know if I have high cheekbones. I've never really thought about that, but I'm definitely a bossy person. She talks about other things as well, like wider set eyes or narrow noses or, different things like that. Because of her mother's fortune telling, she sees these different traits and assumes things about people's personalities, but then they're usually correct, at least with the characters in the book, right? So that was kind of interesting. But basically, the storyline is that Mercy comes from this underprivileged Chinese family that is struggling just to eat every day, and she hates it. She has finished going to the school that is offered to Chinese Americans. It only goes through the 8th grade, and she's like, I need more, I want more, I deserve more, right? So she, through scheming and bribing and a little bit of threatening, she gets her way into the St. Clair's School in San Francisco, which is this elitist school for girls. Soon finds out that it is not going to teach her valuable things like math and economics, but they work on embroidery and serving tea and being a good host, right? So she's a little disappointed by that, but she's like, you know what? Just being able to say that I graduated from this school is a big deal, so I'm going to keep working on it, right? So she stays. Then eventually, by about page 200, like I said, is the giant earthquake. And the whole world is literally shaken, right? But especially her world. So then there's these different things of people losing everything. Suddenly the rich white people don't have their fancy Victorian homes and their fancy things and their pearls and their high-heeled shoes, right? And suddenly everyone is just living in tents, scraping for food, getting threatened by the army because the army is told to shoot looters on sight. Ugh. Anyway, So Mercy then, even in all of this tragedy, it's like her moment to shine, and it is beautiful, and she rises to the challenge, and it is so, so great. And I don't want to give away any details. I want this to be a spoiler-free review, but she's a very admirable character, totally someone that any reader could look up to. You can always find something good in her. She talks about how life keeps trying to tear her down, and near the end, she had some great lines. She talks about bobbing back up to the surface. And I liked that wording, the bobbing, because if you think about something bobbing in the water, it's not completely in control, and yet it's still staying on top, right? So she's acknowledging that she can't control what's going on around her. She had no control over the earthquake or her classmates' actions, things like that. But she just keeps coming up, right? Not necessarily up on top, but she is fighting her way up, and she's staying up there no matter how rough things get. So I really like that imagery of bobbing. So the author, Stacey Lee, she wrote Under a Painted Sky. I haven't read that, but it's pretty well known. On the back flap, that's what I'm going off of, it says she's a fourth-generation Californian, but she has roots in Chinatown, and she is definitely Chinese. So I feel like she's pretty credible in that sense. I would like to look into the history a little bit more and kind of learn more about the earthquake and about the different groups of people living in San Francisco. Mercy talks a lot about the different pockets. Like, obviously there's Chinatown, then there's those pockets of Italian that I talked about, there's pockets of French and Spanish and all these different things, right? And so it would just be interesting. Oh, and Irish. She talks about the Irish a little bit. It'd be interesting to look into that and understand the history some more of how the city evolved. I love San Francisco. I used to live down by them, and I think it's a really, really neat city. There's a lot of history. The Golden Gate Bridge is beautiful. The architecture is really, really neat. So it'd be cool to just understand the city a little bit more from a social perspective, and how things changed. Because now I feel like it's now a pretty inclusive city. But according to this book, which I totally believe her because, like I said, she comes from those roots. The author, Stacey Lee comes from those roots, so I feel like she does know what she's talking about. And clearly things were not always inclusive. They were very exclusive for a long time. It was really good. I really, really liked it. Another thing I liked, she pulls in, like I said, Mercy's mother was a fortune teller, so she pulls in the things like I was saying about the set of your eyes or the way your teeth are or whatever. She pulls in those. She pulls in Chinese proverbs. She pulls in great quotes from lots of people. Like, she quotes Benjamin Franklin at one point. It was just very nice, and Mercy seemed it was like you were learning with her, because I guess it's slightly a coming-of-age story. She's kind of finding her place in the world. And so a couple of times she was like, and then suddenly I was overwhelmed with the whole realization that blah, 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 and she realizes something about the world, and you're like experiencing this with her as she's growing up and as she's maturing and as she's realizing how mean the world can be in some ways. But she did know that. I don't know. She's understanding a lot more. It's not just, well, she always believed that she could change things, but it's not just this one path, right? She talks about how, like at one point to her Italian friend that she makes, she says there's many ways to cook a noodle, which the Italian friend had said to a different girl before, and Mercy just listens all the time and she learns so much. And so I love that then she brought that back up. She was like, you don't have to do things the way people expect you to or the way they even want you to. Like, be your own person, do your own thing. I loved it. It was really good. So that was Outrun the Moon by Stacey Lee. I'll see when it was published. 2016. It was, it's from an imprint of Penguin House. I don't know this imprint. I've actually never heard of this. That's kind of interesting. Typically, I've heard of them. G.P. Putnam's Sons. Hopefully, I'm not making myself look totally naive by saying I haven't heard of them, but I don't know who they are. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, I really, really liked it. I highly recommend it. But like I said, the earthquake doesn't happen till almost page 200. And of course, her getting into the school is definitely a plot thing, but it's not big, exciting action and drama, right? It's definitely a more character-driven book. So, which I like. I love those, but be prepared. If that's something that bores you to death, this might not be the book for you, unfortunately. But I do recommend it. Mercy is a great, great character. She's insightful, a hard worker, very, very optimistic, but also realistic. Yeah, you should read it. Check it out. Outrun the Moon, Stacey Lee. Keep reading.